Hello and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions with your host Bryan. My voice is a little hoarse today and we probably have a good 4-hour video ahead of me, so you'll probably see more breaks than usual where the video jumps harshly to the next scene rather than smooth like it's live. I'll probably be taking frequent breaks for my voice. Today we are checking out Thy Darkened Shade. We're going to look at the Liber Lvcifer I album. We were going to look at 2 if you looked at the information spreadsheet, the schedule, and you saw that Liber Lvcifer II was up, and you're like, oh, that's awesome, it just came out. It got changed last minute by the requester, which is fine, because I've actually heard a track off of this one, and I enjoyed it. See, almost a week ago to date, April 29th of 2022 was the first time I heard them, and that was the track Liber Lvcifer, the title track from this album. And my thumbnail says, have I finally found black metal I like? That's a pretty good start. On August 29th, what's up with the 29s? I checked out Thy Darkened Shade. I don't know what album this one came off of. Possibly Thy Darkened Shade. The name, the title, the band were all the same. And I put wonderful music with a blackened sound, so I have high hopes going into this. I don't think Thy Darkened Shade is on this album. It is not. But Liber Lvcifer is, so we have heard one off of here. And I was pretty happy about it the first time we listened. However, I'm still wondering if I should push this off a week, because next week is April 29th on a Saturday for an album review, and that would keep the 29 thing going. It would keep the April 29th a perfect anniversary. If I had another album lined up, I'd probably switch these around, but I don't know what the next album we're going to do is, so I don't know. Let's just go on with this, and we'll ruin the tradition of only listening to Thy Darkened Shade on the 29th of a month. We're going to kick off with Holy Lucifer, which is a 1-minute intro, and then we'll go into our second track. We'll pause it, we'll take a moment to talk about what's going on. What is going on with... Okay, now the title right there is correct. Let's hit it, see what's going on. Love that moving bass line underneath. We have a choir effect, I think, on the vocals. Really moody and atmospheric. Oh, a hard stop other than this heavy high-pitched whistling? Ugh. Thank you. That's the black metal I was expecting. A little variation on our right guitar. It's interesting that they're mixing the pedal tone writing that I associate more with heavy metal and thrash into the 16th note consistency. Yeah, the bass is coming through rather nicely. Just intense. Constant, relentless. I don't have a sharpness of tone too. I don't know if that high note is actually dissonant, but it's a very sharp tone. I love that bass line, just casually sitting on the bottom, quarter notes. What is going on here? I feel like the guitars are is it 7? Is that what it is? I'll never know. This is just chaotic though. This is a flurry. We're only 3 minutes into the song. We're only halfway done. It feels like we've been listening forever already. A lot of those little modulations too. It's what threw me off last time. I think the drum shifted to a 3. It might have just been a tempo shift though, and that's what we got there, is a small tempo shift. That's a fun little idea too. I'll try to talk about that later, try to remember it. Yeah, getting hard into those grooves, setting up this atmosphere. Oh, we have shifting directions on the two guitars. And the bass is circular, which is just creating this... It's a whirlwind. It's just immense power circling in upon itself. constantly rising and falling simultaneously. Sorry. The drumming has some neat ideas. Like, we have stuff like this, it's just really, it's pretty metronome style. But the last section was kind of diverse. It was really nice. Our blast beats with the 16th bass kicks. Oh. You know, it was kind of pushing towards that larger than life. Wrong button. It was pushing towards that larger than life kind of sound. And I was like, okay, this is getting big. It's getting massive, very wide. And so I was expecting a really long fade out. You know, you hit your last note or whatever, it's just 5-10 seconds of fading on it because it's such a big sound. The brain almost wants it to last longer. You know, a whisper doesn't linger as long as a shout does. I guess that's to say more scientifically, larger sound waves tend to take longer to flatten out. And so when we get to this massive section of the song, and then it was just like you hit the note, and then there was a guitar slide, and then and then it's over. It's almost like they zipped the song up, like they were packaging all of it into a bag, and once they got all the song in there, they just like pulled on the string, and it's like zoop, and the song's over. It's almost anticlimactic in some ways, but I don't know, it's just interesting. It's not what I would expect, and that's always going to intrigue me. Makes me want to explore more about it. And the first place I want to look at is, you know, the lyrics. What are they singing about? Does it make sense for it to do that? Because musically, like I said, it's one of the last things I would have expected given where we were going with the ending there. So, what kind of music is this? I'm kind of curious what rate your music listed as. What is this band called? Oh, Thy Darkened Shade. Oh, this was 2014. Almost a decade ago. Almost. Listed as black metal, death metal, and a little bit of prog metal. Okay. See, the reason I wanted to ask is because, much like I inferred from my previous thumbnails, this is highly atmospheric. There are interesting melodic elements to it. The previous songs I looked at said that it was really great with atmosphere, and there are a couple of really great atmospheric sections here, but I wouldn't call this atmospheric black metal. But the blackened aspect really shows up quite rarely, and honestly the production is far and away from black metal. This feels more like death metal that happened to use some thrashier elements at times, and went for that wall of sound element. But I even mentioned at the beginning, you know, a lot of the riffage is heavily based around pedal tones. Not something I hear too often in black metal. A lot of black metal is based around dyads. You sit on a note. You don't return home. You do chord progressions on your two guitars. And so to hear more traditional metal riffage going on here, death metal is actually, it wasn't where I was pointing towards, but it makes sense now that I see it. Um, yeah, and that, like, here's the thing too, is that genre is weird because very few people go out of their way and say, hey, I want to make a metalcore song, right? You usually just write the music that comes naturally to you, or you replicate who you enjoy listening to, and then the genre gets applied to you by your fans. And so it's not really productive to talk about a work of art through the lens of genre, but I think it is interesting, at least on a uh, databasal level. That's not a word. Like a scientific level of, analyzing where things come from and maybe where they were borrowed from and how they arrived at this sound, where their influences might have been, that kind of idea. I think it's really interesting to see what parts and pieces come from different places. Um, and through that, I begin to hear where the death and the black sort of meet and merge and diverge. And I just think it's really cool. So that's probably, I was going to say it's probably the last time genre is going to come up in this analysis, but I already know that the last track, not the last track, the title track hits on some different ideas. So there might be other moments to bring in the genre conversation um, and talk about it in an interesting way rather than just to compartmentalize the track. Anyways, though, I thought we were going in for some black metal, and actually, I said we were going to move on from genre, but black metal is a genre I'm not too hot on. Death metal is a genre that tends to work better for me, though I find it to be sometimes a bit harmonically flat. It's not dynamic in some of the ways I like. But the thing is that death metal tends to be dynamic in the ways black metal isn't, and black metal tends to be dynamic in the ways death metal isn't. Death metal has the rhythmic ideas to it, whereas black metal is rather rigid. And black metal tends to have the harmonic ideas that I really enjoy, whereas death metal tends to sit around pedal tone riffage and, well, honestly, just pedal tones in general. Even like a breakdown is just going to be like a pedal tone. Um, it's more about that rule of cool style than music theory. And I'm not saying all black metal falls under theoretical ideas, but there seems to be more theory in black metal, specifically chord theory, than death metal. And so it makes sense that they can come together in a way so often because they do cover up each other's weaknesses, at least as far as I see it in the realm of dynamics. And it allows you to take the best of both worlds and find contrast within it. It's pretty neat. All right, now we're moving on from genre. I promise. I don't promise. Who knows where I'm going to ramble next? So the song kicks off, and we have our instrumental opening, which is highly atmospheric. I enjoyed it for the most part. That high pitched whine I could do without. I'm hoping it means something. Maybe when we get into the lyrics for track 2, we can see maybe what track 1 was alluding to. Maybe it's a musical idea that's going to pop up later in the track, later in the album. I don't know. It was a very harsh start, and then the intro didn't go into the next track. We went back to that high-pitched whine and then just abruptly shifted in. I think part of that's just going to be that the YouTube videos move into each other. I wonder if on the album there isn't a typical 2-second gap there. That is one of the things about gapless playback, or near gapless playback, as YouTube loads the next video in the playlist, is that not all albums were designed to be listened to gaplessly. And it's possible this one wasn't meant for that. So it felt kind of odd going through that. It was a very harsh transition. that felt like it shouldn't have been. I don't know. This, though, had 2 seconds at the end of the track, so maybe they are supposed to go together, because that 2 seconds was injected into the second song there. Which you just make that a harsh transition. Anyways, we have the setting of the atmosphere, I think. There's a lot of power and darkness, eeriness, all of this is sort of present in the beginning. There's also a choir effect on our vocals, which has, religious connotations, at least for me. And then, of course, it is Thy Darkened Shade, and I believe they do deal with Satanism and or the occult in some manner. I believe that's one of their main lyrical inspirations. Actually, yeah, this album specifically, occult, satanic, dark, ominous, heavy, infernal. So yeah, they really set the mood at the beginning without utilizing the metal aspect too heavily. And we got a nice down-tempo introduction, which almost feels like a ceremony being conducted. That opening track was, it was called Holy Lucifer. Like, I couldn't tell that it was a cult right at the beginning. Ah, man, I gotta open my eyes sometimes. We move into our second track. I don't know if I'm going to say all these track names because some of them are a bit outside of my understanding of pronunciation. But this one I can pronounce. Revival Through Arcane Skins, which is just... Ugh. But reviving somebody through magical or supernatural means and possibly supernatural skin, that could be that could be straight up read that way, putting somebody's soul into a demon's body or something. Especially since we're talking about Holy Lucifer, it could be a way of putting Lucifer into somebody's body and kind of going the reverse on that direction. Anyways, it is an image, regardless of how you read it, whether you read it more straight or metaphorical. We kick off the song though with a bunch of power. We get in driving real fast. It is just intense. And we really don't slow it down much. Throughout the song, we go through several sections. There's one time signature change, maybe. I'm still not sure about it. The phrasing at least gets kind of garbled up, and I'm not sure what was going on there. But for the most part, everything's in 4/4, and there's several tempo shifts throughout. Sometimes we go into half-beat groove ideas, but even when we're doing that in the drums, the guitars are typically full speed ahead. I don't think the guitars really took too many moments in here to chill out and relax at all. And the song is just aggressive, relentless, driving consistently. The vocals mix between harsh vocals and clean choir-esque vocals. I'm wondering if we're going to see more clean vocals, more traditional cleans throughout here. It seems at least that the vocalist can sing. They just opted not to, at least so far. Not outside of that choir sound. Yeah, that's the energy of the song right there. Driving, relentless, constant, 16th notes everywhere. And the drums are really the only place that lighten up at times, but they can't pull the song back on their own. They just get dragged behind the cart. Let's see. The drums, I pointed out one moment when I was like, they kind of shift their style every once in a while. At this moment, they happen to be more metronomic and kind of playing on the pulse. I never came back to that though, but the drums do shift to moments where we hear some really interesting stuff. I wrote down a note here. It was this really cool idea because we had... Oh, yeah. That's actually for the guitars. Anyways, the drums do some really cool ornamental stuff where they kind of change things up. If we take a 2-bar phrase, the first bar is one thing and the second bar is another, and then the third bar is one thing and the third bar goes back to the first bar idea. The fourth bar, though, does something new, and it kind of helps wrap up the 4-bar phrase. And I thought this was really cool because it keeps the drums feeling interesting and diverse and contrasty, all the things I love in music, without removing the intensity. They're all similarly constructed, but there's little differences between all of them. Sometimes we shift entirely from like snare on 2 and 4 with some ride cymbal work, and then we'll do a bar of like blast beats and 16th notes on the bass kick, and then we'll switch back to the ride and the snare on 2 and 4, and then we'll go into some sort of drum fill in the 4th bar to pull us back to the beginning. And so the ideas themselves are fairly rigid and iterative, but they're utilized in patterns that I find to be a bit more complex and interesting. So the drums are doing that all over the place. I don't think I heard any melodic drumming in here, but they always find ways to introduce neat drum patterns at times to break up the more rigid metronome style drumming that is present across this track. Now my note here is actually for the guitars. The guitars do something similar as well, where we will have, I don't know, like 2 beats. Yeah, 2 beats of pedal tone writing. And then we'll have 2 beats of a lick. And this is pretty typical. We've explored a lot of this through the hard rock genre, where you pedal tone and then you do something to wrap it up. You go back to the pedal tone, you do a little lick, right? But what's neat here is that it's not consistent. Sometimes that lick will be weighted 2 beats to 2 beats. Sometimes it's 1 beat to 3 beats, and there's an extension of the lick. That usually happens on bar 4, as usual, to wrap up the larger phrasing. That's something we see a lot of bands do, but I just think it's really interesting that they shift so frequently. Once again, it's iterative ideas, but used in conjunction with each other at such rapid moments of switching between the two that it comes off as a bit innovative. I suppose there's a lot of that. I'll keep my ear out for other instances where we kind of get those 50-50s is what I think I want to call them, where half of the idea is one style, the other half is another style, and we just bounce back and forth between the two. Heavy, relentless, I already talked about the bass. Man, we gotta talk about this bass. I'm loving it. I'm loving the bass. I kind of wish I had an easy way to bump up the bass just a little bit, but I don't. Maybe the next time I pause the video, I'll go edit some stuff and bump the bass up a bit in the equalizer. Because the bass work here is phenomenal, and it is given the spotlight, production-wise, volume-wise, I think specifically, quite a bit, but there are several moments where I really have to listen in for what the bass is doing, and I think those are the moments that I typically hear it aligning itself with the bass kick, which might just be not muddying it up, but they're forming together in my mind. I hear both of them simultaneously, and so the bass kick has the thump. It has the really big attack, whereas the bass has a wide body tone. Its attack isn't as heavy. So I kind of hear the attack of the bass drum, and then I hear a little bit of the body of the bass, and my brain just associates that with the decay, the tail of the bass kick. I think that's what's going on in those moments. But the bass is just constantly moving. It's funny because everybody else is like 16th notes everywhere. The guitars are just picking as fast as they can. The drummers just got, both feet just going wild. And the bassist is like boom, 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 boom. Just got these nice quarter note pattern. So slow, like the tortoise, just taking his time, but getting to the end just like everyone else. Oh man, it's so good. But the bass does provide some harmonic contrast, or I should say just straight up harmony, to what the guitars are doing. It acts as a bit of a chordal progression, almost in the same way that bass is used in jazz. And it is a walking bass line. It's constant quarter notes, very jazzy. The chords are not jazzy, but the idea of it is kind of jazzy, and I like that. But when we compare what the guitars are doing, sometimes the same, harmonizing with each other, sometimes doing completely different things, the bass is sort of like the glue in the middle that helps everything make sense. It pulls the guitars in, contextualizes them with its with the, like I said, it's kind of laying down the chord progression, so it contextualizes what our guitars are doing within the chord, but it also provides a third set of notes to what our guitars are doing to further layer on the notes, to further layer on the note relationships, the note distances, the intervals, and creating a more complex chordal idea at any given moment, specifically on the beats, I should say. And it's just, the bass does so much work, and I don't think it really gets a lot of recognition. Especially, like I said, it could probably use a little bit of a boost at times, volume-wise, but it's such an important role in this track. At least, I don't know if that's going to be consistent through the rest of the album, but in this track, the bass just carries such an important role. And I think it really elevates the track from something that's great to something that's awesome. And the last thing I wrote down is large/larger than life. I don't know why I put large twice, but I did. The song ends on a very big note. And in fact, there's several moments in the track that feel very large, very larger than life. I just repeated it. And they're just massive moments, whether it's the production or the layering or the harmonic quality, which is pointing towards something grand, which happens a few times in here. We do have our eerie darkness that's present through a lot of our chordal ideas, but there are some sections that take that darkness and warp it into a type of dark perseverance or dark triumph, and it pushes towards this big idea of triumph, of achieving your goals, but not in the typically bright, colorful, celebratory sounds. Taking those ideas and mixing them into a darker, I mean, some of it could just be the tone of it, right? The tone of the guitars are rather dark. The bass has this really nice full-bodied warmth to it. And so we kind of have a dark sound overall, but could also inject darkness into the chordal qualities, which I think is happening as well. And so it is like that moment of success. I've finally done it, but like also with elements of darkness creeping underneath it. Like what you have done is not actually great. Like in the movies when the good guy finally completes their goal and the bad guy's like, I was stringing you along this entire time. You just completed my master plan for me. Like that kind of thing. You succeeded, but like there's darkness under it. So yeah, that's just present all throughout this track. Anything else? Anything else? Vocals, man, just not my cup of tea. They're fine. Oh, production. So this is a very clear death metal production to me. It kind of aligns itself a little bit with the atmospheric black metal side, where we do have the fuzziness in the guitars, but the notes are extremely clear. You can definitely hear what notes they're playing. And the drumming isn't muddy at all. Definitely sitting more towards the higher fidelity side of black metal, but I feel like the way that everything's produced, the openness of it, there's almost no compression to the sound at all. It's not as large as, say, a jazz or classical recording, or maybe something proggier. The sound sphere does feel a bit closer to me, but it isn't right. It's not that claustrophobic sitting right on top of me feeling that black metal tends to have. In fact, it feels like a pretty standard death metal production. Here I am bringing genre back in. I said I want it. But it's good enough for my ears. I think if they continue on and explore these heavily layered sections, they're going to reach a point of diminishing returns where maybe a larger sound sphere is going to help them. But for this track, at least these two tracks, I think the size of their sound sphere is fine. And it allows their big moments to feel big. Because that's the other thing too. You don't want it to feel too large, or else there's going to be emptiness in your big moments. But you don't want it to feel too compressed either, because then you're going to miss those dynamic highs. It's a balancing act, and at least so far, I think they did a good job finding that sweet spot. lyrics and move forward. And I'm now reminded that this is that lyricist. Name dropping deities and occult entities left and right, and alluding towards elements of mythology from all over the place. I remember I went and looked at the lyrics for the title track to see if I could remember what was going on there. And yeah, that one had a bunch of Norse ideas in it, including the Midgard serpent, and it spoke about Ragnarok and Loki, and all sorts of stuff. So, oh yeah, and then just like name drops every single title that Satan has had right before the end. Um, yeah, you gotta have a PhD in world mythology to understand these lyrics. So I don't know how good the lyrical analyses are going to be at all in this video. On this one, the best read I have is they're summoning Satan and putting him into a body, possibly. The idea of revival through arcane skins. I'm not sure what the through arcane skins is, but it's stated right at the beginning: Satan, Numa, rise below. Just is exalted and elects vessels to become the highest of all. So we have vessels that we can put you inside of them. I'm thinking that's what they're going with. There's several lines throughout here that are written in a language that Google identified but could not translate. What it spit out in English was the exact same thing I put in. So I have no idea what those are. Maybe they are once again names. Well, actually, now I see Azazel in this one. I'm pretty sure that has been a name of a demon. I don't think there's ever been a name ascribed to Satan, but maybe it has. Um, Tubal, Cain, Io. I don't know. But the language here is very, well, I'm pretty sure I said this last time as well. It's very flowery. It's very adorned in ways not necessarily, I think, to obfuscate the meaning, but in order to make it sound more official or religious in some ways. But at least for me, it makes it very difficult to read through it. And I looked around, I could not find any notes. Genius doesn't have annotations. Nobody has written dissertations about the lyrics. Um, at best, from arm's distance, not being able to really understand what's going on, I find them impressive. Not just in the density of words, which actually there's a lot of words here for a black metal track, even though it is, what was it, 7 minutes long? Yeah, 7.5. There's still more words than I would expect for death or black metal. But there's also a density to the words, and there is a vast understanding. This person, the lyricist, do we have a lyricist name? We do not. The lyricist is obviously quite educated and possibly very passionate about mythologies and the characters within them. But yeah, just casually name dropping Azoth coiling inward as the black dragon ascends, and the eye of Rudra unlawfully opened, witnessing the higher of selves. From the night side of Venus, serpent seed transpire, revealing me salvation and death's soundless desire. It's just, it's very, very poetic in a way that, like I mentioned, has a vast understanding of the topic. And it takes somebody with equal understanding and possibly passion to really dissect what's going on here. So, like I said, on the surface, I think this is just about saying, hey, bro, we got some bodies for you to inhabit, Satan. Whenever you want to come on up, we're chanting for you. We're rooting for you. You can do it. Take over a body. And so having like I said, the first track, our intro track, is very ceremonial. And I think that works well because this could be seen as a ritual. And the opening track kind of sets that up. And then just the raw passion, emotion, probably the anxiety and stress of putting this together and trying to raise a god that you hold in high esteem. I assume this is some sort of Satanistic tribe or congregation or religion or whatever, trying to raise Lucifer and bring him into the mortal realm, which carries a lot of weight. I'd say you mess it up and then you're on Lucifer's bad side, and well, that can't be good, can it? Very few deities do you want to get on the bad side of. So the music fits that. It's intense, it's consistent, it's driving. I imagine that's what it feels like if you're trying to raise a god. We're going to push forward here. Check out the track Elixir of Azazel. Speaking of said name, we'll dive into this and see what's going on. What do we got here? I know this album is like 75 minutes. Oh, this track is 10 minutes long. Tracks 4 and 5 are 10 together. 6 and 7 are 12. 8 is 10. 9 is 10. 10 and 11 is 13. I think we're going to be here a long time. We'll run the next one by itself since it's 10 minutes. 4 and 5 will run together since that's an intro and then another 10-minute song. I don't know what we'll do after that. We'll see where the album's going. All right, let's hit it with Elixir of Azazel. Bass just kicking this one off. Really interesting, mixing the 16th note black metal style of, you know, just sitting on a note and doing dyads, and juxtaposing that with more death metal types of riffage. Very powerful vocal moment. Sort of phrasing trickery. Yeah, putting in that triple idea. strange. That last section was only 14 beats long. It felt like a 4-4-4-2. And it wasn't just a transition into this section, it was like that the first time through the repetition as well. Yeah, now we're 4-4-4-5. Oh yeah, we gotta talk about Dissonant too. That's just a gnarly sound right there. Interesting riff. Very textural. Oh man, this is... That last section felt like an eternal descent. Go another odd phrase. Oh, even stranger. Oh, that bride bell. Yeah, you hear this section? These triads are so good. moments like this on the guitars are really neat. And hear how the bass comes in to fill in the end of this line? This is going to go into... No, it's not. Alright. So, y'all remember me talking about minor variations. You do something 3 times, the 4th time you do it, you change it up so it can bring us back to the beginning of the idea. This is done in this song on so many levels that it's bonkers. Like, beyond what... So I pointed out in several of these sections that our time signature will be 3 bars of 4/4 and then a bar of something. That something could be anything. We had bars of 5, we had bars of 2, we had bars of 3, we had bars of 7, we had a bar of 6. And so when you look at it in the smaller realm of a 4-bar phrase, you have 3 bars of bass line and 1 bar of variation. What's interesting is that several times through, if you look at it at the larger picture, so you have 4 bars making a phrase. Well, 4 phrases would make a section. You repeat the idea 3 times, right? And that gives us a 16-bar section. There are so many times when we don't get a 16-bar section because the final 4 bars get changed because we're technically in the 3rd repetition, the 4th time through this larger phrase. And so we have 3 times through this 4-bar block that are all the same, and then the last time through it, maybe we'll only do the first 2 bars, and now we have a 14-bar phrase. And it's so weird in how often I can look at things and say, okay, this is, broken up into quarters. So the first 75% are going to be something that's standard, and the last 25% can change from moment to moment. Every time we repeat it, it can change. And this works at like the most micro level, it works at the most macro level. I'm sure if we looked at this track, we could even look at the progression of structure, which I'll tell you, I'm not even going to lie. We are 20 minutes now almost into this album. It all sounds the same to me. It really does. I hear nuance. Like, I'm not going to tell you everything is just the same thing one right after another, but it's all just relentless aggression. A lot of it with 16th notes. I know that the riffs themselves are different. I can hear that, but it all feels the same to me. So I find it really, it all feels linear too. I don't hear many callbacks, but I wager if I took the time, listened to this on my own, paused it, notated it out, and looked at the structure, we might even see some of this larger idea of 3 groupings of the standard and a variation within the larger ideas of structure as well. It's kind of bonkers just how often this pops up, at least in this track. I don't remember it being as prominent in our second track, but it could have been that I just wasn't looking for it yet. Or, it could just be thematically aligned with this elixir of Azazel. I don't know. But I just couldn't not notice how it was everywhere. You listen to drum patterns and you break them up into quarters and you're like 75% is one thing and then we have this change. Oh wait, but if I look at this drum pattern on a larger scale, the first 75% of that's the same, but the last quarter is different. And it works everywhere. And I'm kind of boggled about just the sheer frequency that this pattern showed up. it's just bonkers. It really is. I don't know if it's intentional or not. Maybe it's just the way they like to write music. They don't like to do things consistent, so they change things up every once in a while. But it's everywhere. It really is. Um, I wrote down dissonance. And the thing is that I'm not going to say there's a lot of moments of hard dissonance where they are particularly playing two or three notes that are not designed to be played together, but there are some very sharp tones that come through, and I think that the note intervals are certainly not helping at all. The most stable note intervals are the octave and the fifth. As we go to different intervals, um, we'll find varying levels of dissonance through there. But when you mix it with some of these sharper guitar tones, it kind of, especially when you have the production on the guitars that we do here, it begins to obscure and blur the lines between whether it is a tense note or interval or chord or a tense sound. They are shrill, but is that shrillness because of the sound of the instrument? Is it because there's dissonance there? And so I think it's a little bit of both in most cases. But so I don't necessarily want to say that the songs are full of dissonance, but both tracks are full of tense sounds. And it's consistently leaving me drained as none of these songs really give me a chance to breathe. I look forward to the songs ending. I'm not going to lie about this either. I don't know why I keep prefacing my opinions that way. I'm done with this album already. That's not to say it's bad. There's a lot. I don't think I've said a single bad thing about it actually so far. I've praised most of what it's done. I do think that it is a fantastic approach to this. I've already talked about how black and death metal can cover each other's weaknesses, and I think that they employ that in the best way. We hear the strengths from both sides in in their execution. That works really well here. But I've had my fill. Unless they decide to drastically switch gears, which I don't see that happening, I'm at a point where I'm like, this is what Thy Darkened Shade does. I'm good. You know? It's one of those cases where I'm in for the inch, but I'm not necessarily in for the mile. It's something I can take in doses. So, I'm going to try something different. Around the halfway point, so track 6 or 7, maybe after 7, I think I'm going to take a break. Pause the recording, go out, maybe grab some lunch, because it's 1 o'clock now, so, about another hour, I'd say, until we get to that point, hour and a half. Be like 1:30. That'll be a good time to break for food. And get a palate cleanser, not auditory. I don't think I'm going to listen to music, but, maybe I'll read some news, check up on my RSS feeds. Uh, Maybe I'll just go look outside for a little bit and allow myself to recuperate because I'm telling you, 20 minutes in and I'm exhausted. The songs keep me so stressed out. There's just constant tension. There's no release to it really up until the song ends. And 10 minutes at a time. I mean, like I said, we have a minute and a half song ahead of us, followed by a 9 minute and 45-second track. So another 10 and a half minutes of music. No, 11. Yeah, pretty much on the dot. Our next group of music is going to be 11 minutes long. And I'm so mentally burned out already. And we're only done with track 3 out of 11. We're 20 minutes done of a 78-minute album. There's so much music ahead of us. So I like I said, I'm going to try something new. We're going to take a break in the middle and allow me to recuperate a bit before we get back to it. And I think breaking after track 7 works well. Unless track 6 has some really interesting things in it. And I'm like, no, we got to stop and talk about it. We'll probably do 4, 5, and then 6, 7. That's 2 more blocks. and then we'll break. We'll come back. We'll do 8, which is 10 and a half, 9, which is almost 11, and then 10 and 11 combined for like 12, 13 minutes long there. And then wrap this up. But yeah, this we started on the idea of tension and we moved into this. But yeah, this is just such a tense album. I think you really have to be on board for it. You have to be in the right mental state for this. It reminds me, kind of reminds me of Ungwa and the way that they sort of wore me down relatively quickly through sheer velocity and intensity of their music. And black metal tends to do that, but we've listened to some black metal in the past that kind of keeps the tension at a medium point, where the tension comes primarily through the rhythmic elements and not the harmonic ones. And this album so far likes to revel both in intensity of speed and intensity of harmony. And everything is just really tense all the time, and it is exhausting. If you listen to this for fun, how? It's rhetorical. It's a bit comical, you know. I am curious though if you've tapped into that part of you and you understand why this album works. Maybe you just relish in the tension, right? Maybe you have a relatively boring life and it helps you break out of that and add some, excitement to it. Maybe you find the tension relaxing in a way and you can zone out and get out of, a relatively tense and anxious life, and you find this, meditative in some way. And you know why. I think the why is the important part. I understand that people could find this meditative. Um, but I'm more curious, like I said, if you've tapped into that part of yourself and you understand why it's meditative for you. I think that's where I'm most curious about. Because there's going to be somebody who finds something, some way that seems different, right? Some people listen to pop music and I'm sure somebody finds it abrasive. But the important thing is why. Why is the music doing this for you? I think that's what intrigues me the most. The last thing I want to talk about before we hit the lyrics is guitar duality. We heard a lot of really cool ideas in this track where the guitars were doing their completely own thing. Their own complete, they're completely owned. They're on their own. They're doing their own ideas, but they're both playing like 16th note ideas. So rhythmically, they're in sync with each other. Melodically, they're completely divorced from each other. Harmonically, they tend to find really neat key moments, usually at the downbeat of uh, a beat or sometimes every other beat, and we get these really neat series of dyads at these key moments. And occasionally, we'll even have the bass laying down bass lines on the quarter notes, just like last song, where they're creating triads with the two guitars, and we get this really nice progression of triads while they're shredding like crazy. But these key notes just kind of keep popping up, and you hear this nice progression, and I absolutely love that. There's also moments where the guitars completely divorce, and instead of both of them moving wildly, one of them just kind of sticks on a pedal note, and the other one is just shredding, and then they'll like alternate who's doing a pedal note, and we get cool moments like that. So there is a little bit of attention to detail about who's doing what on the guitars and what it sounds like, because the guitars are hard panned out to either side. You can play around with ideas like that because they are exceptionally distinct and separated sonically in the production. And it's not something I think is exceptionally important to every piece of the song so far, but it is something that pops up often enough that at least to me it's intentional. And they say, "Oh, what would happen if we did this? What would that sound like?" Like at the near the ending of our last track, Revival, where the two guitars were alternating ascending and descending patterns, and the bass was rising and falling, doing just a pretty standard walking bass line idea. And so the whole thing felt like a flurry, like a tornado cycling in and eating itself. and just constantly, it's this constant drive forward. There's no ending. It's a loop. Everything's moving in circles. Everybody's showcasing cyclical elements, and it's so effective at what it does because of the way our bass is centered. The guitars are pushed out to the side, and it feels like you're enveloped in this cycle. And so there are these moments of visual painting that I think goes on in the music where they understand, the guitars are very distinct, very separate. What can we do with that? And I appreciate it. This one had some cool ideas in it as well. Like I said, the bouncing back and forth of the pedal tones. That is one of the things I think I'm going to be looking forward to the most. It is the coolest aspect so far, and the one that keeps puts a smile on my face, I suppose, where the rest of the song is really trying to beat me down. Another set of lyrics I have no insight on. Once again, though, I do want to point out something interesting. So many of these sections are 4-line stanzas, which give it a very strong poetic look as far as visualizing the lyrics themselves on paper. It's always a series of 2 or 4 lines in a stanza, which once again kind of harkens back to the ideas of hymns, at least for me, and the rigid structure of that. Also, some of these lines are just bonkers with the poetry. Thou seest what Azazel hath done, who hath indoctrinate black arts on cosmic soil, and divulged the unceasing gnosis which is in chaos, sculpturing blood in the resemblance of the dark gods. Azazel, apocryphal denotes of Sophia, I am with the glowing cremations that scorch inside thy horns, I sparkle. It is, as much as I don't get it, there's a cool factor here, right? Not to say that necessarily the topic itself is cool, but just the way that everything sort of rolls off the tongue. It's a combination of flow and imagery that even if I don't understand exactly what's going on, I get the gist of it. And I think that a lot of credit should be given to the lyricism in that regard, if nothing else. But I honestly have no idea what's going on. And there's a lot of lyrics here. I don't remember there being that much growling, but this is a big one. And it's linear, I think. So it kind of lines up with what I thought about the music being linear on this one as well. That I didn't recognize any distinct repetitions or landmarks in the music. I don't see any distinct repetitions or landmarks in the lyrics either. It is just a series of lines that I can't even say it tells a story. It jumps so often between what's happening now and what the narrator wants and events of the past that are probably still coming out of the mouth of our character here, our person, but harkens back to tales of old and bringing them up once again, name dropping things left and right. Shemyaza's hecatombs infect Orion, fathom the heavens for aeon and aeon, casting to Eden lament eternal. It's wild. So we're going to move on. Like I said, we have a 1 minute I didn't know it was an intro. We have a 1 minute lead in track 4 that goes into track 5 here. Let's see what's going on. Kicking it off with Black Light of Sitra Ahra. Raw tension in this music. It is palpable. I feel like I'm going to be visually physically drained. I'm gonna have bags under my eyes by the end of this album. I just recognized this track and the first track are listed as instrumentals. They don't have lyrics, but there is singing. I'm curious what they're singing, if there's a translation for any of that. Another interlude. Much like our opening instrumental, it doesn't go directly into our next song. It just exists on its own as a 1-minute choir track? Oh, that was fun. Yeah, hitting that double time. Really interesting foreshadowing there with the bass pulling in this next idea. A beat, 2 beats early maybe? Emphasizing 2 and 4 there. Yep, there's another one, only 14 bars long. snare on 2 and 4 is killing me. We have a third guitar in here. It was playing a melody with the 16th note idea, but it existed outside of the two normal placements of the guitars. It was sort of center right. Weird. Yeah, just a little bit of rhythmic diversity with that triplet in the left guitar, and opening up the atmosphere a little bit. That was really nice. Yeah. And just leaning into the atmosphere that our right guitar is dropping. I'd take a lot more of that. I could. Put the choir behind this. Some flutes. Yeah, that section could be real nice. You know, the linearity of a lot of these tracks is a little sad for me. When I hear a good section like that, I know we're not going to go back to it. It's a bit of a shame. That was interesting. It had the drawstring pull from the opening track two, but we also had the natural ringing out that the large guitar sound I would expect from. Interesting to pull both of them together. Man. The first thing I want to touch on is get rid of metal, which is what I wrote, but I'm kind of honest about that. This is a thing that I've said about a lot of black metal in the past, but I usually think there's interesting ideas compositionally. I'm just not a big fan of the way that it gets delivered. And I think it would be very cool if we took the general ideas here, but swapped out the instruments and some of the intensity. We'll get rid of some of the 16th notes in places, and as long as they're not changing a note, not changing the pitch, we'll just hold it out until we get to the next note rather than play it 8 to 16 times. We'll get rid of that rigidity of rhythm and introduce notes with length to them. And that's not to say that it would be better. It would be different. And it's actually something that I'm looking at exploring more of, is arranging metal music in different settings. I've actually begun a while ago, and I've begun picking it back up now, is arranging tools sober into an orchestra setting and adding some lines into it, because putting four instruments and trying to assign that to a full orchestra, it's a bit anemic. So I've been adding flourishes here and there and spicing it up. But I think this is something I really enjoy doing because of exactly this right here, where I want to enjoy the composition, but the delivery is a bit abrasive to me, and I don't know if I'm ever going to get over that hurdle. There's certainly some really gorgeous moments in here, such as that section I loved. I don't even know what to call it. I could call it the triplet section. It's not the only time we heard triplets, but a very dominant triplet sound coming out of our left guitar. That was beautiful, and I think it was really supported by those constant 16th notes coming out of our right guitar. I don't know that that section would work with an entire wholesale shift like I was talking about, but most of the rest of the songs so far, I think, have had interesting harmonic properties to them, have had neat melodic ideas, but have been delivered through an exceptionally harsh and abrasive tone, atmosphere, and production. And I can't help but think to myself through a lot of this, would I enjoy this if I could stomach the general sound of it? And for this album specifically, I don't know entirely. At least for me, a lot of what I associate with this album and its strengths, what it's trying to achieve, and how it's achieving them would be difficult to do without the harshness and distortion of the metal. In fact, one of the things I talked about earlier was dissonance, not necessarily through harmony, but through texture. The tones of the instruments create an element of sharpness, of harshness, that might be a little bit in the notes themselves, but isn't entirely. The production of it all plays so much of a role into the character of this sound. An arrangement might capture the vibes, but it's not going to capture the essence, or I should say, it won't achieve it on the same level. But it doesn't stop me from thinking at times, this is gorgeous, I wish I could stomach it. That kind of idea. And again, it's not to throw shade at Thy Darkened Shade. That wasn't intentional, I promise. Um, it's not to badmouth them or anything. Like I said, I think they're doing what they're doing exceptionally well. and the sounds they chose are perfect for I think what their goals are. It just isn't for me, but I like some of the ideas that sit underneath the general sound. And so I wrote down, get rid of the metal. I think I'd enjoy that. Give me a stripped down version of this. There's so many cool layered sections that I'd love to hear outside of the metal context. And even at that one point, the triplet section, I was like, I could hear this with flutes and the choir behind it and ornamenting around it and really, adding on to it. But that's not who they are. That's not what they were going for. Um, but it kind of makes me want to do that too. I've done that before. Was it Wolves in the Throne Room? Is that what the band was? Or maybe the song? And I was like, I can hear some stuff behind this. So then I grabbed like a snippet and I put in like a string section and a choir and I posted it up. And yeah, people enjoyed that. And I enjoyed making it too. So maybe that's something else I might work on is I don't want to call it amplifying. I don't want to call it betterifying, but adding elements to metal tracks. I think that might be fun too. Anyways, yeah, there's too much metal in here for me. That's for sure though. Regardless of anything else I've said, there's too much metal in here for me. The other note I wrote, this is going to be a quick one I think, but I just the density of it all. We've talked about the layers. We've talked about the intensity of the track. We've talked about the consistency of the 16th notes and the kind of weight that they bring. Yeah, we've talked about the fact that all three string instruments play their own things at times, which gives us multiple levels of melodic elements as well. And something I just clicked with me in the middle of this track. I was thinking, this dude doesn't shut up, in a joking kind of way. I don't want anyone to tweet at this band, hey, this guy thinks the singer sings too much. Um, But like I've mentioned, there's a lot of lyrics to these tracks, and there's even a density of that as well. And we look at how the lyrics are delivered. It is just this singular raw growl. It's a really harsh sound. And so it adds to the weight of the track. It adds to the width of the track. And so this album so far is just dense all over every angle that you look at it, whether it is lyrical density, width density, weight density, darkness density, uh, tension density, everything that they do, they make sure they fill the song with it. And so the songs, multiple, plural there, all feel incredibly packed, very full. And I even mentioned this at the beginning when we were only 3 minutes into our second track that was like 9 minutes long or something. I felt like the song should have been over already. And we were only 3 minutes in. I was like, geez, that's when I knew this was going to be a long album for me. But at that point, I had already been overwhelmed. It felt like I had heard so much music already. And I had. It had just been compressed down into such a short amount of time, and they really fill in and make the most of their time. It's I don't know if efficient is really the right word for it, but the ability to cram so much into so little sounds like efficiency to me. But they're just maximizing everything they can out of every moment, and it's a lot of a lot, for better or worse. Artistically speaking, definitely for the better. The album, I think, does what they wanted it to do. I'd be really surprised if there were many regrets about the album, at least what I've heard so far from the people involved with it. Nothing's ever perfect. Every artwork gets tossed out into the world imperfect, with areas that the artist wished they could improve on or correct or change. But I'd be really surprised if anybody had some really large, obvious things that they would rather have done with this album than what they did, because I find it to be quite effective at what it does, and it seems to line up with the intentions of the lyrics. So it seems to be fairly comprehensive to me and very intentional. So yeah, let us hit some lyrics. We'll do the next 2 tracks, hit the lyrics. I'm going to take a break. Okay, so I have the exact same comments I have about the lyrics this time as I have for the past few. I don't know what's going on. They're very poetic. They allude to certain feelings and atmospheres and sort of a specific general idea. A specific general idea. Good job. But I have no idea what's going on in them. So I decided to read ahead. I checked out every single lyric on the album. None of them mean anything to me. So we're going to cut the lyrical analysis out. Hopefully that'll bring the time down on this video, because there's so much music ahead of us. We're already 90 minutes in. And there's no point in taking all these breaks to just say, I don't know what's going on. Let me repeat myself for a second, just so that I have some content for the lyrical dives. So we're going to save some of that, hopefully tighten up the pacing of the video a bit. I will say, though, the final track, the lyrics are in Greek, which is very cool. And they translate basically into a bunch of praise for Satan. And what he stands for. It says that he's the redeemer of the spirit, the god of rebellion. He has contempt for the creator, and he evokes insight and freedom into man. So, I mean, I'm pretty sure the whole album is just praise Satan, the fighter of authority kind of vibe. Which I suppose is... it works well, I suppose. So, with that said, let's push forward. We're going to dive into the next track here. The next 2 are shorter. We have a 6 and a 6. Probably playing back to back. Break them down a little bit, and then I'm going to take that break. So, let's hit it. Moving on. Chilling out for a little bit, taking a bit of a smaller tempo, allowing these notes to breathe and exist without just pushing forward. It's that large booming voice again. I can kind of take this. This isn't as oppressive, even though it's still 16th notes on the guitars. There it is. Really big sound too, putting the choir on the outsides so the vocals can sit center. But it does, it feels like we're in a very large space. It works really well. Like I said at the beginning, I think they found that sweet spot for the size of the sound sphere that they're wanting. glad this song is deciding to kind of chill out a little bit. It makes a nice midpoint to the album. The call and response between the guitar and bass. Yeah, see? This is what I'm talking about. That dark vibe could be carried over rather well, but it's no longer really oppressive, and I think that would be similar even if I brought in a full orchestra. I still don't think I'd get that weight that the electric guitars do. I think it'd be a fairly faithful adaptation, but would not be a perfect representation of everything that they're doing in this album. With that said, though, please, more of that. Can we do a whole 6-minute song? They're not having anything of it. There's another 5 at the end of a series of 4s. There's a 7, so we had 4, 4, 4, 5, 4, 4, 4, 7. I love the way the guitars are bouncing off of each other right here. It's almost got like an echo vibe to it. It's nice to get away from the black metal content 16th notes for a bit. I praised the balancing at the beginning of the album, but I feel like the past few tracks have really leaned into the black metal riffage more than death metal. Oh, getting a little bit of groove in there with those syncopated hits. Yeah, very cool atmosphere here. This is the second time we have the rising triplet vibe. Ooh, what? Wild. More of that triplet modulation over the straight 16ths though. Bass just killing it in the middle. Yeah, okay. I'm ready for that break. Got a couple of things I want to talk about. I like how these two tracks chilled out a little bit. Not overall, both of them had their moments of intensity and forward drive and momentum, but especially track 6. I mean, track 6 gave us a 1-minute outro, give or take, of acoustic guitar, I think that was. We had several moments throughout that kind of brought it down a notch. We introduced track 6 on a little lighter of a tempo and intensity. We had the guitars playing whole notes rather than several 16th notes whenever they wanted to stay on a single pitch. 6 just generally chilled out, and 7 introduced a couple of moments of, well, I guess comparatively relaxed modes. I don't think anything in here was really relaxing, but compared to a lot of the stuff we've been experiencing on the album, it was more relaxed. We can say it that way. We had more emphasis on that triplet feel, and it feels like seems like every time that triplet feel comes in, especially played against a straight section, whether it's quarter notes or eighth notes or 16th notes, is that it tends to open up the sound. And so the weight feels like it's gone, even if harmonically we're still looking at something a bit more darker and intense. Even if the rest of the instruments are playing 16th notes and we have that metric rhythmic weight to it, the atmosphere just feels like it opens up every time. And I don't know why that is, but I've come to appreciate it. When I hear a triplet, I'm like, ooh, this is going to be good. I'm going to have a moment to, chill out, cool down a little bit. So after 5 songs, well, technically 3, because we have the 2 interludes in there, tracks 1 and 4, the 1-minute congressional songs. That's not congressional. What is it? Congregation. Would that be congressional? I don't know. Where we have the congregation though, and it feels like we're beginning a service or a ritual in the case of our first track. But aside from that, it's just constant pressure, tension, drive, momentum all the time. So bringing it back and reining it in a little bit for these 2 tracks was much appreciated, especially as I am definitely at the ends of my limits. This was a good place to stop. I was actually tempted to stop after 6 and say we'll come back, but I was like, Bryan, you told them you do 6 and 7 together. Just get through it, and then you can take a break. I'm pretty good at whipping myself into to just doing what I need to get done, huh? So that was interesting. But like I said, I think it's in a good placement, middle of the album. You give the listener a little bit of a break, but not too much. You can't lighten the album up, that's for sure. I don't expect the final 5 tracks, the final 4 tracks to be any lighter. This intensity needs to be kept up, I think, to achieve the specific goal they're going at. I'm also thankful for these moments where I can turn the song off and talk about it. I don't know what I would do if I had to listen to all 75 minutes straight. Even if I didn't take this break I'm going to take to just go do something else for a second, having these, 15 minutes between tracks to talk about them is exceptionally welcome. It's just, again, how do people listen to this? Not in a derogatory way, but literally, how do you do it? Do you just feel what they want you to feel and walk out of the experience stressed? Or did your body find a way to convert it into something that's better? I'm going to stick with better. Another thing that, what is this? Oh, okay. My pen was dying. In fact, I don't think I'm going to be taking any more notes because this is my last marker, and I don't think it's writing much anymore. But I don't know what I was saying anyways. I'm glad I remembered. The division between the blackened and the deafened has been a bit unbalanced to the black metal side, at least rhythmically for a few tracks. And it was nice to return to more of the death metal sounds. I'm not a big fan of the death metal riffs. A lot of pedal tone writing here. That's not my favorite type of riff writing, but death metal tends to have a little bit more syncopation to it, a little more rhythmic diversity, and overall gaps in it. Bump, 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 bump. That initial bump and then a break, and we get that staccato note at the beginning, and then a rest before we finish off the riff. That was I think that was the last riff we heard actually. Bump, 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 bump. There's that little break there at the beginning though, which is silence. That is something the black metal riffage of constant 16th notes does not afford us. And so having this rhythmic diversity, having rests in the riffage itself is it's big for me. It's part of the elements that I think also leans into the idea that things have started to mellow out a little bit. The intensity is all still there. It's still a very weighty song, but that overbearing, consistent sound is dropped for the death metal rhythms, which tend to have, like I said, a bit more variety to them, rhythmically and melodically. And I really appreciate that. I need more balance of that. Um, and I praised the album at the beginning for finding a nice balance between the two, but I feel like we've shifted really hard into the black metal writing for a few tracks now. I'm glad to hear the pendulum swing back the other way. So, one is overbearing for me, and the other one's not my cup of tea. So, neither side's really great, but the contrast, the division of the two helps. It helps me get through each of these tracks just a little bit better. Um, Revisiting some topics, I had mentioned at the beginning that a lot of this album, at least up to a point, I think we were on like track 3 at the time, could be broken down into groups of 4 and looking at the 75% versus the 25%, the foundation and the variation. That is not as true anymore. The last couple of songs have not abided by that at all. It's really interesting to see the composition shift so heavily that we barely hear that idea at all. In fact, track 6 didn't have anything like that, and track 7 only had it once, and it was a transition idea, I think, and I pointed out where we did the 4-4-4-5, 4-4-4-7 or something like that. And we changed up the time signature every 4 beats, or sorry, every 4 bars. And I think in the larger picture there was something going on there too as well, but maybe not. But that was really it. Everything else has been rather static. 16 bar phrases, a 4-4. So it's really interesting to hear that so heavily dominate in the opening like 3 tracks, and for it to be completely diminished here in the middle. I'm curious. I don't want anyone to go out of their way to do this for me because I'm not that curious about it. But, you know, I'm wondering why specifically those tracks went in that direction. If there's something in the lyrics, in the story being told, like I don't even know if this is a concept album. There is a general concept of Satanism going on here, but I don't know if all these songs are connected in any way other than thematically. But is there something going on in tracks 2 and 3 and maybe 5 that would emphasize this sort of what would we call it, a lack of symmetry that track 6 and 7 didn't want to play around with at all? They wanted to go more on the symmetrical side. And so, like, if you already know what the lyrics are about and you want to give me quick little rundowns on a few of them, I'm down for that. But, like, I don't want anyone to go out of their way to learn all of this mythology and to, like, dive into all the poetry of it and figure out what he's actually saying. You know, spending hours and hours and hours on getting an understanding of this just to let me know. I, uh, I'm interested, but maybe not that much. That's a lot of work to put in, and I couldn't ask that of anyone. But I do feel like I'm missing something, not understanding the lyrics and only getting like the baseline gist of what they're aiming towards, and primarily more their themes and emotions than really any solid idea of thought. Um, but yeah, so that whole uniformity of phrasing it's here now where it wasn't before. And that kind of goes back to the whole time signature thing too, where we've been listening to a lot of songs that are sticking with the 4/4 and just changing tempo up from time to time, occasionally introducing symmetric modulation through the use of triplets. Triplets seem to be the go-to thing. If we don't change up time signature, we'll throw some triplets in there, and that kind of achieves the same deal, I guess. So, alright, I'm going to take a break. For y'all, it's just going to be a quick jump cut. For me, I need like 15-20 minutes. So, I'll catch y'all in a bit. Alright, I am refreshed. Let's get back to it. We're going to be moving on with the next track here. Let's press forward and see what the last third of the album has for us. Of course, I took a break right before they decided to also take a break. Regardless, I'm here for this. This is the type of atmosphere that I think they do a really strong job of creating, just without the aggression that typically gets tied with it. Yeah. Love the way the guitar plays off of both the side guitar on the right and the main melody here in the center. Heavy vibrato on that. Oh, here we go. Okay. Yeah, okay. I'm starting to piece something else together about the way that they modulate tempo or perceived tempo. Once again, I thought we were almost done. We're only halfway through. And this album just bends time in the weirdest ways. Ditched all the weight to really go hard into the eeriness, the creeping factor. Ooh, what was that? The left guitar is just sitting on a pedal tone. Okay, so we shifted to 4 bars of 3/4 here. Oh, what's going on in the cymbals? Oh, yeah. Yeah, just going for a really large moment there. Interesting they didn't run it to the end though. Alright, so this is probably going to be my final thoughts on the album. Unless tracks 9 and 8 do something, 9 and 10 do something. 10, not, wait. There's 3 more tracks? Oh my jeez. There's more music than I thought. Oh man. No offense to the person who requested this. It is a phenomenally created album. It does what it does very well. It's just really not my cup of tea, and I'm ready for it to be over. Oh man, there's 11 more minutes of music than I thought. Okay, so this is probably not going to be my final thoughts, though. However, we will probably see some similar thoughts at the end of 9 and then at the end of 10-11. I wrote down with what little marker fluid I had left. One of these is barely legible, and I'm just glad I can remember it. Guitar precision. I was like, oh no, what did I write? Guitar precision. That song in particular, I don't know why this hadn't clicked with me prior. That one in particular, though, something clicked in me. I was like, dang, that was a pretty sick guitar line. And it was one of those pure 16th notes, like most of the stuff has been. And it was like groupings of 2 hits per note. And I was like, that was tight. And then it started to make me think about all of it. When you're playing 16th notes, I tend to think about the raw endurance required to play at this level, at this speed, at this consistency for an entire show, if they play live shows. But this isn't just constantly playing 16th notes and moving the note every bar. The idea of a whole note, like black metal typically does, this is constantly moving. This endurance is not just in the right arm to strum this quickly for such an elongated amount of time, but also to play the proper notes when you're supposed to play them. And there's a lot of fast playing for the left hand on this track and on the album as a whole. And so I started to think about not just the precision of timing in one arm, but the precision of timing in the other hand as well, and pairing them together and just being consistently precise on all these riffs. And it never lets up musically, and the guitarist never lets down the band. Guitarists, I should say. The drums get plenty of moments to change things up, hit a halftime feel, enter some groove. There's a lot of moments to sort of musicianly, if that's a word, to stretch your muscles, right? You do the same thing over and over and over and over and over, and you're gonna want to stretch a little bit. It's like laying down. It's fine at first, but if you've done it for a while, you're like, oh man, gotta get the body stretched out, right? And you start stretching your muscles out. They want to do something different. And the guitarists don't really get that affordance. The left hand is playing fast a lot of the time, and the right hand is just pure 16th notes for a vast majority of the album. There isn't really a moment to to get away from that. And so I was like, dang, the guitarists here are just on another level. A lot of admiration, not just I'm going to assume to compose this music knowing you would have to play it, but putting the work in and building the muscles memory for it and the muscle stamina for it, and then putting the shows on, I would assume. But even if not, just recording it at this level of precision it's bonkers. Now, here, once again, much like track 2, I felt like the song was over. And it was about the time we returned to the chanting and that generally laid back vibe. And it was like the opening. And I was like, all right, cool. We're going to bookend this song with this choir stuff. And then it didn't stop. And then the guitars kicked back in. And I was like, well, how close to the ending are we? We've got to be pretty close now. And we were at like 5 minutes and 15 seconds out of a 10.5-minute song. And I was like, no way. This song feels like it's been on forever. How are we only halfway through it? And we talked about this at the beginning about the density of this music. And it's just constantly being a lot that even in a short amount of time, it feels like you've listened to so much already. But I think another part that aids in this is just the sheer amount of shifts going on in the music. And I started to pick up on this here as well, and I'm really happy for that refresh to kind of get away from it for a little bit and do something else mentally that allows me to come back with almost a fresh mind, almost like we've started the album over again, and I'm listening a lot more intently than I was previously, or maybe I'm just listening more. I don't know, it's not like I was not engaging with the music beforehand. But it's like the first song, I have to really dig in what's going on here. And by the third, fourth, fifth song, I start to see the patterns. And maybe my mind dulls a little bit. Taking that break allows it to resharpen and it's ready to dig back in. But anyways, yeah, it's constantly moving. And I kind of talked about this a little bit with the drums, where we'll do one thing for one bar and one thing for another bar and one thing for one bar and then a different thing for another bar, and then we'll go into a completely different section and we'll only be in here for like 15 seconds, then we're going to move to something else, and the drums are just all over the place. They're doing everything. But I started to listen to what the guitars are doing, and I noticed that they're doing something similar. Granted, rhythmically, it's all the same. It's not like the drums that are dancing around, half timing it, grooving it, going into straight sixteenths. The guitars are pretty much the same rhythm all throughout, but their riffs change all the time. And so, in a 5-minute span, we listened to the amount of riffs and sections that another band might put into a 10-minute epic. And I think between the sheer density of every section and the speed at which we move to new sections, it really feels like we listen to multiple songs in the span of just one, because there's so much musical information being injected into our ears that it can't possibly have just been in one song. There's been a couple of times during this reaction that I've looked up at the title that I put over here under the video, and I'm like, wait, that's last song's title. Have I not updated it yet? And I'll switch over to my YouTube. I'll change focus over to my YouTube video. I'll be like, oh, no, that says we're still in this song. Okay, that's weird. I could have sworn we changed tracks sometime and I just forgot to flip things around, but no, we're still in this song. In fact, half of it is still left. What's going on? And time just gets warped so wildly, which is, it's an interesting phenomenon that I don't know that they necessarily went for. with intention. And it might not be universally felt either. At least for me, this is a 75-minute album that's going to feel closer to 150 minutes. But I do think it's interesting that I'm getting this feeling out of it. This idea of losing time, of not being able to, because my internal clock is pretty good. You ask me at any moment of the day what time it is, and without looking at a clock, without having recently looked at a clock, I'm still usually within 5 to 10 minutes of the time. And for me to lose track of time this way is a wild phenomenon. It's not something I'm used to experiencing. I'm pretty good about it. But I do think it's interesting that it's paired with an album about doing rituals and having these services to summon and praise a god and to bring demons into this world and stuff like this. And like, it's supernatural and occult in a way that makes sense that a loss of time or a feeling of lost time would pair well with the idea of, a 5-minute ritual taking 30 minutes or something. Or communing with the devil, so to speak. I don't know if that's something that happens in any of these lyrics. I didn't pick up on it, but the idea of that, and it feels like, 30 minutes have passed while you're speaking to this deity, and you come back to the real world and you're like, oh, that was only 5 minutes of real time, but it felt like it took longer because of the, I don't know, the concepts of time speaking across planes, right? And everything that goes into the ritual of it all. So it's interesting that I'm experiencing something similar to the occult supernatural elements going on. Like I said previously, we're not going to hit lyrics because I got nothing to say about them. Push forward into the next track, which is also 10 minutes long, almost 11, and then we'll run 10 and 11 together. So, title track, the one we have checked out before. I did refresh myself a little bit on it, but I only went to the middle to listen to a couple seconds to remind myself. I don't remember all this track. Lovely cymbal work. Really tight rolls with swells to them. I have lost track of one and I cannot find it. You see what I mean about just constantly switching sections though? We don't stay in any idea too long, and I think once you notice it, it's hard to unnotice it. So I think this section and the previous one are in 5, possibly with one of those changes at the end of every 4-bar phrase. I love that bass line. It's sort of uplifting. Especially with the backbeat snare, it's very fun and bouncy. The guitars don't line up with that, but the drum and bass right here is deceptively happy. Like this whole section, just thinking about the precision the guitars have to put in. Now we're working in ideas of 6/4. Or it could just be 3 though. Yeah, we could be pulling back to that 3/4 we had earlier. These accent patterns are bizarre. Nice little break, kind of reins everything in a little bit. Still gotta get that tension in there somehow though. Fake out on that snare roll. Again, the guitar precision. Interesting harmony there. I really love the moodiness here. I could listen to a whole album of this. Variations on this style. Yeah. We're just going to keep it rolling. We're going to get the intended experience of this final 20 minutes of the album. Let's get the full weight of an extended listen. The synergy between these two guitarists, the precision, it sounds so clean. Gnarliness of that riff. Are they speeding up? That bass tone, I kind of wish it was at this level the whole time. Feel how it's a little empty? It's gonna close in on itself. Oh, not yet. Very cool, adding a nice melodic element that's been missing. There we go. Collapsed in, filled in all that space. Interesting tone on that. Especially interesting to add in this new tone so late in the game. Five-bar phrase? What? That's exactly what it is. It feels like a 4-bar phrase that gets extended by an extra 4 beats that don't really go anywhere. They're just sort of meander. The counterpoint here between the two guitars is pretty sick. Okay. It really feels like it should have been a transition idea into our next track. But it wasn't? very ominous, going heavy into the atmosphere. Yeah, okay. Spoken word then. Okay. I love that bass putting in the momentum, keeping the song pushing forward while everyone else goes for atmosphere. Really interesting emotions they're exploring here. So different than anything else on the album. They just couldn't give me one song, could they? So they're really going for this larger-than-life, certainly religiously, congregation, and this is where they're going to end their album. Bringing back the harshes and the choir for the first time in quite a few tracks. Yeah, that's a neat way to wrap it up. They couldn't give me one though, right? I was thinking, I was like, I think this is going to be the one I put down for my favorite song of the album. And, I mean, maybe. But it still has a lot of things that are just a bit much for me to really get into it. I don't know what my favorite would be. I mean, I usually in this case I just put a question mark, or I should switch it over to NA. I didn't have a favorite. All of them kind of appealed to me in the same way and didn't work for me all in the same way. That none of them stood out, which is really what the three question marks mean in my spreadsheet for myself. Is that I don't have a favorite. None of them stuck out to me, I suppose is a way to word that, and that's what happened here. Um, and that's not to say that this isn't a good album. I think by the breakdowns that I've given today, I think showcase that there is a lot of exceptional things going on in this album, and that it achieves pretty much everything it sets out to do. In that case, it is a phenomenal album, but I never want to hear it again. It is not for me at all. Um, but I do enjoy their atmosphere, and I wish they would dig into that a little bit more. Like I had mentioned, the requester had actually selected part 2 of this album that came out this year to do, and about, I guess it was a few days ago, maybe it was last week, they were like, actually, can I swap it out for the first one, Liber Lvcifer I? And I was like, sure, whatever, until I actually record it, I don't care as long as I have time to get everything prepped. And so it was kind of a last minute change. But I wonder where this band is now, 9, almost 10 years later, if they've decided at all. I know there were a couple albums between Liber Lvcifer I and Liber Lvcifer II. I think there were 2 albums that came out between then and now. I wonder if they changed their sound at all, if they've explored more of their atmospheric elements, if they've explored more of their calmer side. And I think that's my big thing, because the black metal sections can be atmospheric. The death metal sections have an atmosphere, but I wouldn't call them atmospheric writing. It really is when they strip everything back and focus on atmosphere exclusively that I think they really hit a stride that works for my ears and my tastes. Not that I taste with my ears, but those are certainly my favorite moments. And the first half of this track went in that direction, and I enjoyed it. I think they do a phenomenal job at that. And I completely understand that it is a very different feel from the rest of their music, and that this album probably, well, it's their intention to be heavier and more intense and more aggressive. But I think they can achieve that darkness just fine with their atmosphere writing. And there's probably another way to achieve a type of heaviness. I don't think you're ever going to get that specific kind of heaviness, though. I mean, the pure 16th notes driving constantly, it wears a listener down. You can't get that if you're not doing that. So, I appreciate what they're doing, even if it's not my cup of tea. Um, Time signatures on Liber Lvcifer. I don't remember that. However, I pulled up my timestamps for the Liber Lvcifer video. And if you want, if you're interested in that, I'll put that up there, and you guys can go check that out if you want. If you want a full, what is this, 50 minutes? What are you doing up there again? 50 minutes about Liber Lvcifer, the track, if you're interested. But it sounds like, looking at some of these timestamps, it's pretty much what I've said about this album in general. black metal composition, which I'm going to assume is the 16th notes, clean production, a variety of melodies, which, yep, linear structure, yep, stuff I talked about, the atmosphere, the vocabulary of the lyrics. But one that stands out to me that I think needs to get pointed out again is the wild time signatures, which was chapter 3 in that video. There's been some really fun time signature stuff going on all across this album, and for the most part, I will notice it, think about it, digest it, and let you guys know what's going on in the moment. If I have time for it. You know, sometimes I pick up on it too late. I'm like, oh, geez, we're in something weird. Up, and we're in something else, which, you know, they move between ideas pretty quickly. So that's happened a few times. But here, I got to sit inside of a time signature for 40 seconds, maybe a full minute, and I just had no idea what was going on. Just a bonkers situation. We had a bunch of 3 in here. We had 5-bar phrases, a 4/4. I think we entered into a 5/4 section. I'm pretty sure there was a 7, but it was only a 7 sometimes, and I never picked up on the pattern of when the 7 came up. It was juxtaposed with 4s, but it wasn't doing what we saw previously in the album, which was 3 bars of 4 and then a bar of 7. There were just so many moments that I'm like, okay, the time signature is getting played around with here, but I don't know what it is. The phrasing is getting messed around with. I don't know what it is. And I didn't have the time I required to figure it out. That's not to say I couldn't figure it out, but I would need to, you know, sit down and play it and listen to it and jot some stuff down and maybe replay it and just have this chunk of the song, you know, this 1 minute chunk on loop until I get it figured out. But yeah, this was the, I mean, I'm sure that this is why it was picked, but I feel like Liber Lvcifer, I mean, it's not only the title track, but it's also the one that I feel is most indicative of their work. A lot of the music in here, in this album, is very similar. But Liber Lvcifer, I feel like, is the most extreme track on an album of extreme tracks, and a perfect way to introduce me to this album. It kind of has a little bit of everything in it. It's got the choir. It's got some, it's got a lot of driving 16th note sections that makes up so much of it. It has some chiller, groovier sections, time signature changes galore, metric shifts, tempo shifts. It really is a little bit of everything that went into this album. And the fact that it's a title track, that probably helps a little bit. I don't know if they intentionally did that, or, you know, they're oh, you know, this is the name of the album. This one's got to be good, right? This one's got to be everything. Or if that just happened naturally. So yeah, the album overall, quick little recap here, then we'll wrap this up at about 3 hours. Not as long as I thought. Taking the lyrics out saved a bit of time, I suppose. So what was this album though? Tons of bass, moving bass triads with split guitar work, split guitars all over the place, consistently changing drumming, consistently moving music. Like every section, just like in something new. Every 15 seconds, there's something changing. Whether it's a minor instrument or a full section shift, nothing wants to sit still here. And there's a larger than life element that I touched on at the beginning that's pretty consistent throughout. The wider sound sphere for this type of music, black metal goes for small sound spheres. Even death metal, even melodeath metal tends to go for smaller sound spheres. I feel like I talk about overcompression a lot in melodeath, a lot more than I would like, because I like melodeath as a genre. Just what I've been shown, the production values are usually a little lesser than I would want out of them. So this actually has really good production, or higher fidelity production than I would expect for both black or death. And And that extra space allows them to layer things up and still keep things clear without muddy, and the layering gives it a very large feel to it. And you get the choir in there, and it's just very larger than life in a lot of places, which makes sense since a lot of it is dealing with the occult. Time signature and phrasing changes all over the place, 100%. And everything else I've written looks pretty... Yeah, it's all like based off of those core ideas, core characteristics, or like specific song sections. It's a lot though. This is an album that crams so much into each section and then crams so many sections into a song. A 10-minute song can have, I don't know, it feels like there's 30, 40 riffs in a 10-minute song. Like, who does that? This was a long album for me. I appreciate the patience sticking with me. And I'm glad I took that little breather there. I felt myself getting pretty tired, and I didn't want to get a bit more negative than I think I should have. I've done that before in album reviews where the back half of an album I feel like starts to nitpick on negatives. And primarily, I've already talked all the positives up, and most bands tend to stick with 1 or 2 sounds for an album, so it's not like I can keep picking up on new positive elements throughout a track. And, I have my criticisms about this one. It's not like I went pure positive on it, but having that little moment to rejuvenate and recollect myself after getting beaten down by this music, I think I'm going to start doing that more often. I feel like the back half of this reaction was the better for it. So, on with the outro. Those are my thoughts on Thy Darkened Shades, Liber Lvcifer I. It has a subtitle, I think, but I don't know what it is. What did you think, though? Oh, Khem Sedjet, sorry. What did you think of this? Did you enjoy it? Was there anything that stood out to you? Anything that I touched on you should have expanded more into? Maybe I didn't pick up on some stuff. Maybe you got a different perspective on things. I also asked a few questions throughout for fans of this style of music. If you want to answer any of that, if you have your own thoughts, opinions, any of it, put that stuff down in the comments. Above the comment section is a description box. In there is a link to Linktree. Takes you here. You can find ways to support the channel, a link to my music, a link to the Discord server, and so much more. I put a ton of stuff in there. Go ahead and check it out. Above that, if you could, like, subscribe, ring the bell. Greatly appreciate all 3. Alright, I'm glad this is over. This video is only 3 hours, but it's taken me 4-ish once you start including the research I did into it and reading the lyrics, which don't get put into the recording time, and the break. I don't want to count that. It's still probably about 4 hours though, when you include all the... And the thing is too, some of those lyrics I was like, oh, I gotta go translate this, what's that about? I went to look up some of these characters and deities and stuff. So yeah, there's a lot of time that went in off screen on this too. It's almost 4 o'clock my time, and I started 10:30, maybe 11. Yeah, this has been a big project for me. I'm glad it's over. Again, no shade thrown towards the band or towards the requester. It is phenomenal music. Just not my cup of tea. And it's been a day putting this together, so I hope it's appreciated. Remember, be critical, not cynical, of the music you listen to, and have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening, whenever you choose to watch my videos.